Stan Stevenson with us. Brother Stan was with us in 2006 at our Vacation Bible School, and as I introduced him back then, he is a native of Lincoln County, grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. He received his Bachelor of Arts at Southern Christian University, recently received his Master of Arts there at Freed-Hardeman University. He began preaching back in 1977. In 1983, he made that a full-time living. So he's done local work not only here in Tennessee, but in Alabama also. He's currently the preacher at the LaVergne Church of Christ, which I've made a mistake this week and said that's in Wilson County. Actually, it's in Smith County, a couple of miles on the other side of that Lebanon area. I guess we'd call that Carthage. So Julie and Stan have 2 sons and 1 daughter, and this evening he's going to speak to us on the topic of loving the fisher's catch. Brother Stan.
I appreciate the invitation to come back and be with you. It's thrilling to think about the technology that is available to us now and the many means that are available to us for studying the Bible and encouraging and helping others in their study of the Bible. I have always envied somewhat, not in a sinful way, I trust, those that were on the earth and had the opportunity to walk with Jesus, those that had the opportunity to hear Him. I've often thought about what it must have been like to hear His voice, to be able to look into His face, to hear the inflections of His voice as He taught and as He spoke with people. Sometimes He spoke, no doubt, firmly, and sometimes very gently. But at the same time, we live in many, many ways in the best of times because of the advantages that are available to us. There are a lot of things that we know and can know that those who lived then did not and could not know. And so I'm grateful to those that have the knowledge and the ability to take these lessons and put them on the web. It might be advisable to turn the video portion off for tonight's lesson and have maybe just the audio, and then some may think, well, we'd be better off without the audio by the time we get through. But I'm grateful to be here. Now, for those of you that do not know where Rome, Tennessee is at, it is about 12 miles east of Lebanon on Highway 70 in as you go toward Carthage. And as I told Phil tonight, when I give people visiting preachers that come for meetings and such and tell them how to find us if they've never been there before, when you cross the Smith County line, it's 2 miles to the church building. We're on the left. You won't have any trouble finding us. If you're ever over our way, we're not trying to steal any sheep. But if you have occasion to be over our way and you can't get back here, then you're more than welcome to stop in and visit with us there at Rome. As Brother Phil mentioned, my topic tonight is to discuss and study with you loving the fisher's catch. We're going to be studying from the 21st chapter of the book of John. We'll be looking obviously at some other scriptures, but the main text is from John chapter 21. And of course, primarily the topic of the lesson, the title of the lesson, comes from verses 15 through 17. John is a unique writer. All of them, I suppose, are unique. But of the biographers that wrote about the life of our Lord, John is especially unique. He only records about 8 miracles that Jesus performed, and only 3 of those that he recorded are recorded by the other writers of the life of Christ. He recorded the miracle of turning the water into wine in John 2, the healing of the nobleman's son in the latter part of John 4, the healing of the impotent man in John chapter 5, the feeding of the 5,000 in John 6, and near the end of that chapter as he walked on the water to go out to the disciples whom he had sent on ahead across the Sea of Galilee in a boat. And the raising of Lazarus in John chapter 11, which seems to have been the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back as far as the Jews were concerned, because that seems to have been the time when they finally made up their mind once and for all to try to get rid of him. And it's interesting that when you read the 11th chapter of John, that they not only determined to kill Jesus, they also determined to kill Lazarus. But then there's also the miracle that's recorded in our chapter 21. Verse 3 records that Peter had said, "I go a-fishing." And there were 6 other of the apostles, the disciples who would be his apostles, that go with him. And we do not know exactly who all of them were. 5 of them are named. Peter is one of them, of course, and Nathaniel, and the sons of Zebedee, and then there are 2 other disciples that are unnamed. Now, many think that one of those would have been Philip, who was a good friend of Nathaniel, and others think that the other one would have been Andrew, Peter's brother, because they had been in the fishing business along with the sons of Zebedee. If that be true, we do not know where Matthew and James, the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, or Thaddeus were at. This takes place during that 40-day period that wherein Jesus appeared to the disciples prior to his ascending back to heaven. In Acts chapter 1 in verse 3, Luke records how that Jesus showed himself alive by many infallible truths, wherein he appeared to the disciples for 40 days. Now that doesn't mean that he was with them for all 40 days, but it means that in that 50-day interval that took place between the Passover feast and the day of Pentecost feast, that 50-day period, 40 of those days, Jesus made various appearances to the disciples. And he only appeared to his disciples. He didn't appear to anybody who was not a disciple. And there were some 10 or 12 appearances or occasions where Jesus appeared to his disciples. John tells us in verse 14 of this chapter that this is the 3rd time that he appeared to these disciples, the men who would be his apostles. We also know that he appeared to 2 disciples who walked on the road to Emmaus. He appeared to some of the women. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul records how that Jesus showed himself alive in order to add weight to the truth of the resurrection of Jesus. He said that he showed himself first of all to Peter, and then to the apostles, and then to above 500 brethren at once, most of whom Paul said, are still alive at this time. That is the time that he wrote 1 Corinthians. Then he appeared to James, and then to the rest of the apostles. And last of all, Paul says, he was seen of me as one born out of due season. And by the way, it's interesting to note that when Paul says last of all, that means last of all, once and for all. The last time the Lord appeared to anybody, he appeared to Paul. Now, I know there are folks today who claim to have seen Jesus, and there have been many that have come down the pike before now that have claimed to have had some kind of appearance of Jesus. But Paul says he appeared to him last of all. And so there are several occurrences of Jesus to different disciples. But this takes place during that 40-day period. And of course, then there would be 10 days after Jesus ascends back to heaven until the day of Pentecost comes. Now, just to give a little more background information in thinking about this, in Acts chapter 1, as Jesus ascends back to heaven, before he does so, he tells the disciples to wait in Jerusalem for the promise of the Father. So this event takes place before that. Peter says in verse 3, I go a-fishing. We do not know if Peter meant by that, I'm going back to my profession, because that's what he had been as before, a fisherman, or whether Peter simply means, as a temporary measure maybe, to make some income, that he was going back to fish until the Lord appeared to them again, or until they went back to Jerusalem. But whatever the reason, Peter said, I go a-fishing. And these 6 other disciples said, well, we'll go with you. And they did. What I want us to think about tonight are really only 2 points that we want to give some emphasis to. Both of them center around the subject of love.